Hello and welcome to the Film Ireland podcast. In this episode, Gemma Creagh talks to Moe Honan, producer of the Magic Reindeer, Saving Santa's Sleigh. Here's the trailer.
Niko?
Wow, it's so great to be back. Cool. It's the Flying Forces. I'll be the best junior pilot ever.
Niko, watch out!
Stop right there. My name's Stella. Since I was little, it's been my dream to fly Santa's sleigh.
Only one reindeer at a time can become a member of the forces.
This is what it's all about.
Go!
You don't stand a chance.
You can do it! Niko! Niko!
Where's the sleigh?
It's gone!
Without the sleigh, there is no Christmas.
What?
Oh
The sleigh is ours.
no. Show me what you got.
There's no time to lose.
Are you all right?
Don't worry about us.
Us?
Bring it on.
That was totally...
Cool? I know. I like where this is going.
You want to move aside there, hot shot?
Pardon me, Mouse.
Stop right there! I'm a living!
This was such a beautiful film. It's so fun. And when it says it's a co-production, it really is a co-production. You really have taken it's not like you're just doing like one little section. It seems like there was so much Irish creativity involved. I was wondering if you could just talk to me about maybe how the first one came about and how you guys came to work on it, and then how the sequel sort of worked out.
Well, thank you, firstly, and for the opportunity to talk about this, because I think with animation in particular, there's a lot that is unknown, I guess, in how we collaborate and how we make films like this. So the Magic Reindeer, Saving Santa's Sleigh is the third. It's a trilogy now we have with our same partners, and that's going back over many, many years. We had Niko and the Way to the Stars in 2008. We had Little Brother, Niko 2, Little Brother Big Trouble in 2012. And we got together again and decided there was another story in this community and universe that we had all created. So by co-production in animation, we definitely have to, bring a lot of creative team and creative work split to the table, as well as our financial contribution in terms of what we can raise and do for that work. So, in Ireland, for example, we've been involved with Support Screen Ireland as well. And through our Irish-based writer, Martin Torreson, who was across all three films, actually, we've been very much involved in the story development and scripting. We've carried out script editing, and we've cast and done all the voice recording and voice directing, which is essentially a major part of pre-production and creating often what we call the radio play. It's the story, and we've been very much central to that with our Finnish producers and Finnish director Kari. So that was our first 8 months more of the pre-production. The scripting actually went on prior to that, so I'm not even counting that. But and then we also were involved in taking our share of animation according to our financial share. So we do look for our Irish-based artists and animators in order to carry that out, and we really then become like one team, because we're working online from 4 different countries in this example. We know each other, of course, a long time and have worked together a lot, so that helps. But we are working online and meeting regularly online together in various departments, like you'd have in a live action film. And we meet, of course, in person throughout the period of production as well. And the period of production on a film like this is approximately 2 years. So development and other work going on prior to that. So we do, yeah, we do really share, all the tasks between us all. Yeah.
Yeah, because like, do you see that on the Irish names in the credits and Emer Noon's amazing
Mm.
score? It was really lovely, and it's interesting to see how that is split. And in terms of, okay, so you were saying that you do development, and then when you go into production, like it's kind of the workflow exists between all these countries. In terms of, does anything change? Like, does anything change in script stage, or does it all have to be sort of locked in place at that point?
No, it's continuously evolving. I mean, it would be a little bit more you know, solid, let's say, from stage to stage. It doesn't remain continuously changeable in the same way you could in a live action movie as much. Let's say I'm not saying it's completely changeable forever in live action. I don't want to make such a claim, but I know that there are things that you can, decide pretty late with live action from my very early days experience with it. But in animation, I mean, I would say things can very much evolve in script and animatic and storyboarding stages. Also, a stage we call layout, which with CGI and 3D is really a kind of evolved storyboard where you block out the positions of characters and you still haven't animated, but you're beginning to compose the shot. And then, things can change there. I think once we start animation, really, which I guess is the execution of that, the execution of all the shots, unless it's a mistake, we're not really redoing that because, of course, it's much more expensive for us to do that. So we like to be on very solid ground when we're starting animation.
And in terms of, do you know, like working on a story like this for so many years, is it something that and a project that's collaborative and like really there's so many invested parties on in this world that has been created like from scratch, that like the physics of the world have been built from scratch. Do you feel like deeply invested? Like, are you, do you know, like if something goes wrong, are you sort of creatively devastated a tiny bit of points? Or, if you have to compromise on something, or if, and there's so many pots of money. If something fell through and you're forced to rework a plot or something, like, or does that just not
Yeah.
happen?
I think it happens less because I think between us we understand that we can't really force change or be totally uncompromising with our partners if it would force a situation that puts them in jeopardy, let's say. We would not be doing that to each other. We have a kind of framework and best practice of how we work, and we understand the stages that are much more costly to change. So there is a kind of a respect involved between us to that point. But I guess equally we know, in the stages I've mentioned, like scripting and storyboarding, and until we lock the animatic, let's say, there's plenty room to talk and comment and bring up your points. And that is the time to do it. And any of your creative or story creative team in each company, and the producers, of course, are inputting into that all the time. But we do usually also create a situation whereby we agree, depending on the co-producers, let's say, creative forte, we will agree sometimes to let them lead a final decision. For instance, I worked a lot on the voices. I work as a voice director as well. And I really, led that aspect, and I could change the dialogue if I felt that it worked better. And I worked closely with the directors on that, but, they would almost defer at times because they would know that that's where my, specialization was, let's say. So there is a kind of, if you're working well as a team, and animation is a highly collaborative genre or medium, I should say, you do, if you're if you're mature and professional, you will lean in to the people that can help a milestone or be stronger in a certain area. And equally, you can let go, if you know it's not yours.
Yeah. And even in terms of financing something that's like a co-production through so many countries, is that sort of difficult to align, or is it something now that's a well-oiled machine after 3 attempts?
Well, I guess in this singular particular case, we did know each other, as I've mentioned, very well in advance. So we kind of knew the basic approach each country had and the kind of criteria and priorities each country had from their funders. But that said, things are always evolving and changing. So even from the last time we had worked together, we had to really go back and revise what everybody needed. And there were new funds and new changes to those policies. So it was, a learning curve again in that sense for all of us. And I would say, actually, sadly, it's not aligned enough across Europe. Each country has their own set of policies and political remits and, to a degree, their own particular approach when it comes to contracts, the language that's used, and the priorities they have. We have a tax credit, for instance, in Ireland. Not all our partners have. So we have commitments we need to make around that we have to ask them to cooperate with. But mostly, as I say, people will collaborate, but at times you can get a conflict. Even if it's just about funding rounds or deadlines, you can really miss out for several months if it's not aligned in terms of which goes to what point in the year and how long somebody has to wait in one country to find out if they are funded. So it is an area actually that, in terms of fostering and nurturing more collaboration across Europe, I would love to see personally a little bit more aligned and a bit more reformed, where there's understanding, or one can give way or extend or shrink the timetable so that we can move more cohesively together.
And does that, like, just say if you were like, okay, now a deadline has passed and it didn't go in under that, or didn't get awarded the right amount under that, so you have to wait another round, like, and then that's pushing everybody's
Yeah.
back and the release back. And a film like this has to come out at Christmas, like it
Yeah.
can't come out at any other time.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And in this case, that would have actually postponed the whole thing by a full year. So, because it gets a slot and an opportunity at Christmas. And we are also trying to deliver, almost half a year lead in to our distributors, so that everything is distributed across the world, because we want to distribute and sell internationally, right? And this film is a great example of that. It has done. It has sold to over 120 countries or territories. So we have to be really timed in that sense and be ready. And it didn't in this case, because we'd really researched and got our ducks in a row, but it could scupper you in terms of actually being able to be a partner, because the others would probably go, we have to keep moving, and they may seek another partner. And that's why it's really important for us to understand and be collaborative from the funding side and legal side as well.
And in terms of distribution, so is a film like this, if it's the third part of a trilogy, is it difficult to sell, or at that stage again is your network set up and do you just run with it? And then with each territory, what would be your deliverables?
The network certainly would be strong on this one, as you say, because of the other films. However, there's nothing given. You're not automatically going to sell, because the market is changing every year. There are pressures on the market, or influences on the market every year that only the salespeople on the ground will really understand and know about. So, they will be selling in a particular way or waiting for particular times or particular markets. So nothing can ever be taken for granted, no. And like right now, we're going through a period, I think, when cinema has really suffered, especially since COVID. There's been a lot of change there. People's habits were broken. And also cinemas have had to change the way they're operating. And so, yeah, it's still recovering, I'd say. And, I'm hoping that people still will go out and support Irish and independent European film, because we need to retain it if we don't want to be completely US film in our screens all the time. And it's a kind of a precious thing. We don't have quotas in a lot of countries in Europe. The French do, but I think they're almost alone. I know they're not totally alone, but they would have the strongest kind of legislation and framework around that to try to protect their cinema. But apart from that, just on a kind of a social basis, I do see the value in it, in a shared experience, or a solitary experience if you want to get away from everything. It's such a great way to escape and to have that, little breather from the rest of our digital stuff that we're looking at, that we can go into the cinema and just escape for a while is just such a gift.
And something like this holds its own against any of, like, the DreamWorks films. Like, it really has its own, and yet has a sort of quirky voice in terms of building that as a story. Is that difficult to find something that resonates with, like, I mean, we are all European, but there's very different subcultures in that. Some would be more like unconsciously conservative than others. There's like, is that a stage where, people at the idea stage, you're like, you can't do that because that might not work in this territory? Is it everything's on the page and what works for story, and it, like, how is it developed?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I mean, there are certainly things that we bump into all the time that are exactly as you say, that just don't translate from one culture to another in terms of a point in or twist. Maybe not a point or twist in a plot. I think we all get that. But certainly in character development, and when it comes to the way we talk to each other and the dialogue, I think that would be an area where we can see differences, and there would be a lot of discussion around that with us, and I was in the middle of a lot of that as voice director, because obviously I'm trying to create the original language version in English, and that is the one that's going to be distributed around the world. So we tend to be a bit more focused on making sure that that is resonating with as many people internationally as possible, so that we don't get too culturally specific.
Yeah, but even the themes in this, when I was watching it, was interesting because, like, there's a sort of misogyny in this all male performative group. They're indoctrinating the next generation. There's this like bravado and like, and I think there's a weird commentary on like the indoctrination of the next generation in that like realm, how misogyny forms, how it's broken, how it's healed with friendship and communication, but how that's in place because of pride. And there's a lot of sort of things that you could be like, is it woke? Like, is it consciously woke? Is it something that you'd avoid like the plague saying because you don't want to alienate people, but like unconsciously you're saying that?
No, I mean, it certainly wasn't in any way consciously woke. I think what we were trying to do, because we had set this up actually throughout the three films, was just to, bring this kind of male-dominated flying forces team, who were kind of originally a bunch of jocks, really, to its conclusion in a way. Just how are we going to move on from this? And does Niko finally get his place among them to fulfill his wish and dream to be a flying reindeer? And, if he's been told all his life that it's his destiny, maybe we should, at least let him earn it. And I think that was kind of the jumping off point, that we wanted him to just not get it, to have a challenge to that. And the whole thing, I think, just evolved in the story. Once Stella appears to challenge for the place, I think it kind of naturally took a turn, which was, well, do we let which one do we choose then? And it seemed to us that given the way that both of their characters had gone through their own internal journey and their transformation, that they would actually probably choose to a compromise of some kind rather than remain in that highly competitive place, which I think is, certainly feels old-fashioned at this point, I think, for us all as a society. Competition is good and it's healthy, but at what cost, At any cost, I guess, is the question. And what's more important in Niko in the end? Is it that, or is it because he wants, a sense of family and community? Like, that was a big choice he has to make.
Would there be a theme that you find from the plot, or do you come at it with theme in your back pocket and use that to kind of drive the story?
I think definitely we wanted the theme of Niko facing, his future and making a big, coming of age decision was definitely the character development we wanted to develop to make the story. And I think the rest of it somehow, because we had those characters around the place, seemed to just fall into the choices they would make. But Stella really is the catalyst to shake everything up. And we also wanted to look at the theme of, of forgiveness, actually, and redemption. And I think we wanted to explore that with some of the male characters, who maybe, because of the fact we'd set them up to be these stoical, flying forcers, that they would not naturally be emotionally developed, I suppose. We wanted to explore that and see what that would bring. And the only people who could bring that about really was the, exploring an old hurt or something that hadn't been discussed, or with Niko, letting him really test the relationship with his dad, because he has hero worshipped him. So, he's put him on a pedestal. And I guess we knew that we would eventually have to come to the heart of that to see what that was about.
And that's very interesting as well. Would this be a case of, do you guys test that with test audiences in different spaces? And is it received differently, or is it the same?
We did test. We did have some test with story, way back. And I think different things come out of it, actually, from that process, because we do it in different groups in different countries. And again, we kind of pool our feedback and pool our comments. And it can influence, of course, the way we develop stories, but it would never always overrule. I think you have to come with and stick to the authentic story drive that's coming from the team and the writers and director. You do have to stick with that as your core belief. If you believe in that's making your good story, but you will consider the way certain people are receiving what story you're telling, because we are in a rapidly changing society now, with social media and everything influencing everybody's decision all the time. You can't let it, as I say, overrule you. You can't pander to it, but you must be aware of it somehow. Yeah.
Again, is there anything, like the way a name means something different in a language, or things that you will have to go through? In terms of something that, again, there's so much work in getting everything right, the sound mix, the deliverables, how it physically looks on each single streamer, getting all those things right, having the subtitles translated in a way that makes sense. Is that just something that is grueling? That name means poo or something in another culture, and you have to go back and rework everything, and there might be a play on words at some point. Is that something that you do on the ground there, or figure out, or prep and then send away? Or is that just something that's sort of done in each territory?
Are you talking about the versioning now for other countries?
Yeah. So if you're going out to over 100 different.
Yeah, no, generally what tends to happen there outside of the co-producing partners countries, so like we already have a version, for instance, in Finnish, in German, in Danish, and in English for the UK and Ireland territories. But beyond that, once a sub-distributor or buyer takes it into their territory, let's say, I don't know, let's say Spain, you're going there. You know, we will work with good partners and we rely on them, of course, and their work to be able to translate well and to be able to cast well and to be able to look after these nuances. We remain on standby if there's questions, if there was some big story question or something that just wasn't understood. But generally speaking, you must, of course, let this also evolve as a creative process, because you just could not take on the supervision of that globally. It would just become unworkable. But we certainly would be all over the original version and making it as a clean a handover as we can to the first co-producing languages. Yeah.
In terms of like editing it and being concise in editing it and having something that's so tangible, like as a finished project. So like is that something that like do you end up cutting much in terms of length?
Yeah, well, we can't really. I mean, we do tweak shots and scenes where we will add a little or subtract a little if it helps the feeling and the emotional space in a scene. But we're not creating outtakes as such. We're not creating something we feel we might or might not use, because it's just not viable really with the way we are budgeted, and we can't be wasteful either in that sense. So we tend to look at it as more fine tuning of timing rather than cutting things as such. We may have to cut some frames out sometimes where there's just an issue with content, but it's rare. You know, we're usually, whatever's in there is not a mistake. We're looking at finessing. Yeah.
And it's gorgeous. And is there a 4 on the books? Are we going to see something a little bit further down the line?
Well, we haven't made any decisions, but we do have partners we're working with on developing a TV series for this universe, because people love the characters and they love the Lapland scenery and love Niko and that community. So, you know, we can see potential for a lot of stories, and we're working to, you know, we're waiting on them. We've given them a blessing to create and to produce a series from this IP, and hopefully that will come to the fore in the next couple of years, and we look forward to getting a wider audience, I guess, for Niko. Yeah.
And it's so beautiful. And again, it grows up with the kids that have watched it. It's lovely to see that evolution. And I think it's so wonderful that our animation industry is so strong here in Ireland. And this is just another beautiful example of the incredible, skillful work that is being created. So definitely everyone should go see that in the cinema.
Thank you very much.
And thanks so much for chatting with us.
And thank you so much for listening, and make sure to never miss another podcast and subscribe to our newsletter on filmireland.ie.